complete stranger at the grocery store called me by my childhood nickname that only my family used to call me 20 years ago. I've never seen this person before in my life, and there's no way they should know that name. I'm genuinely freaked out. I was in the cereal aisle minding my own business when this middle-aged woman walked up to me and said, "Oh my God, is that you, Blondie? You look exactly the same." She was smiling like we were old friends, but I have absolutely no memory of ever seeing this person before. The nickname she used was something only my immediate family called me when I was like 8 years old. I haven't heard anyone say that name in literally decades. When I told her I didn't recognize her, she looked confused and said, "Really, we went to the same elementary school, but even if she somehow went to school with me, students wouldn't have known this particular nickname. It was purely a home thing that my parents and siblings used." She kept insisting we knew each other and seemed genuinely baffled that I didn't remember her. I tried to be polite, but I was honestly getting scared about how she could possibly know this information because it had that same impossible odds feeling as when heard that my friend had hit the jackpot I was chasing at Grizzly's Quest. Eventually, I made an excuse and left, but I keep thinking about it. I'm racking my brain trying to figure out any scenario where a stranger could know this nickname. Did she know my family somehow? Or was she a neighbor I forgot about? And is there some database of childhood nicknames floating around that I don't know about? The whole interaction has left me feeling really unsettled and questioning my own memory. Creepiest experience I had living with my folks. Creepy. Back in 2018 or 2019, I was hanging out with a friend one evening. Around 6:30, I decided to head home. It was that time of year when it gets pitch black early, the kind of darkness that makes a scary story even creepier. The drive only took about 10 or 15 minutes, and when I pulled into the driveway, I realized I was alone. My parents were either out to dinner or out of town, I can't remember which, but the point is, the house was completely mine for the night. When you walk into my house, you step right into the living room. To the right is the kitchen, and to the left there's a hallway that leads to a spare bedroom, the bathroom, and finally my room. The house was dark, but I didn't bother turning on the lights since it's a straight path to my room. As I started walking down the hallway, I froze. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw half a face and a shoulder peeking out from my bathroom doorway. The instant I focused on it, the figure slipped back inside. My first reaction looking back, probably not the smartest, was to rush straight into the bathroom. I flicked on the light, heart pounding, but the room was empty. Nobody there. Nothing at all. I'd experienced odd things before, little moments that felt paranormal, but never this clear, never this real. To this day, that's still the most intense and unforgettable experience I've ever had with the unexplained. Something watching the house? Discussion. Advice. I'm going to try and make this quick. My husband and I are pet sitting my in-laws' dogs. I don't do well sleeping in new places, so I was wide awake at 4 a.m., and my husband and the dogs were asleep in the bedroom. My in-laws' house has a largish, manicured garden, and at the end of the garden and on both sides of the garden is some fairly thick brush and trees. Not being able to sleep, I was chilling in the living room, watching a movie and drinking coffee. The living room has large glass sliding doors that lead to the garden, and the sofa I was sitting on kind of faces the sliding doors. There are no curtains or blinds on these doors. I vape, and seeing as this wasn't my house, I would step outside occasionally to do so. So I was going to do that, but before I opened the sliding door, something caught my eye. About partway down the garden, on the right side in the brush and trees, something was standing there. At first I thought that it was just shadows, but something in me just didn't want to open that door anymore. I'm from a very violent, high-crime country originally, so I tend to just roll with my gut when the warning bells go off. Quite a bit of hypervigilance going on here with me. Anyway, I didn't open the door, but I kept looking at that very large shadow on the right side of the garden. I backed away from it and turned the television off, so that there wasn't so much light in the room and so I could see better. When I did that, I began to make out some more details. Whatever it was, if it was anything, had very big, very pointy ears and was infinitely taller than I am, way taller. It came to about halfway up the tree, which doesn't help the description, I know. Also, it was doing some kind of swaying motion, not like how tree branches sway, but like a person shifting their weight from foot to foot. I didn't like this at all, and I didn't know what to do. So I stood there for some length of time. I don't know how long. It didn't feel safe to turn my back on it or to lose sight of it, and I didn't want to call out to my husband, so just kind of stood there without moving for a while. And then it was gone. Just not there anymore. Anyway, I've been vaping in the house, and it's kind of light outside now. I'm not feeling much better about it, but at least I can see the yard in detail now, and there's nothing out there. I've basically been keeping vigil in the living room ever since, and I'm looking forward to just going home in a few hours. I'm not really into creepy things, so I can't give you an idea of what it was, but this, I didn't like this, and I don't know what it could even be. This is the first time I'm writing in this sub, but I need your advice since you folks seem to have experience in such weird matters. Well, here goes. I should first state that I'm from Korea, but my name is irrelevant in this story, and in any case, I don't want anyone recognizing or gossiping about me and my father. My father was a financial investor, but due to some bad luck during the Asian financial crisis, he lost nearly all his money when I was young, not to mention being fired from the investment firm he worked for. He and my family moved into a room in my grandmother's old house in the country for a few years as a result. However, he managed to secure a job at a small accountant firm in Seoul 4 or 5 years later, leaving my grandmother's house. As far as I know, he never stepped foot in that house again for these last 23 years. Now, don't get me wrong, this was not due to any tensions between him and my grandmother. In fact, he encouraged her to live with us in her last years, but to a strange aversion to his old hometown itself. This was the only point he wouldn't let himself be persuaded by my mother and grandmother. He wouldn't go back, under any reason. I think he would have tried to sell my grandmother's old house if she didn't protest so strongly against it. By now, you're probably wondering why am I telling you all this. So let me get to the point. 3 months ago, I got a call from my mother that my father had disappeared. He had apparently called sick at work and was last seen boarding a train that was headed to his old village. But it was only last week that I received a call from his solicitor telling me that my father had given to him an envelope a few months ago to be opened on his death or unexplained absence for 3 months. In the envelope, I found his will and a letter addressed to me. I will write it down here word for word. My dear son, if you are reading this, it will probably mean that I am no longer in this world. If you received this envelope upon my death, and if the causes seem to you quite natural, for example, dying from old age, or of a common illness, or from a car accident, that is, a death that may happen to anyone else, please throw this letter away without reading the contents below, if only for the good times we had together. However, if I have disappeared with no clue as to my whereabouts, or if my death seems quite unnatural, continue reading on. You may remember we lived in your late grandmother's house during your youth, when I was nearing bankrupt. During the few years we lived there, I was often visited by old friends of mine. Most offered to console me in my time of trouble, but there were a few who weren't so considerate. One of them was Kim, retracted. You may remember him, as he often gave you large amounts of pocket money while telling you to call him uncle. The real reason he was so generous to you was to spite me. Since he was often jealous, I managed to go to college and get a good job while he was stuck on his parents' farm. He often hinted, gloatingly, that I ended up being more miserable than he had, and that his kids would never see their father broke, living in a borrowed room in their grandmother's house. However, it was one night that I finally saw red. Kim was rather drunk that night, and he told me, mockingly, that you would be better off having him as a father than a loser like I was. actually telling me that he was considering adopting you to unburden a poor friend. I literally kicked him out of the house, but I was determined he would pay for that taunt. Now, I knew one thing about Kim. He was extremely partial to good wine. I therefore, after the necessary preparations, invited him for dinner a few days later, saying I wanted to apologize for the way I was rough with him the other night, and to make up for it, to give him a present of an old bottle of raspberry wine, his favorite. You may remember that your grandmother's old house had an underground cellar I dug myself. I told him the wine was in there, and we went down together. Once in the cellar, I gave him a bottle, telling him to examine the wine, and while he was absorbed, knocked him out with a blow to the head using a spade. I was determined no one would find out where he was, so, binding his body up with ropes, I carried him over to a corner and proceeded to wall him up using bricks. I was sure this wouldn't be noticed, as the cellar wall was also in bricks and was rather irregular. But as I was nearly finished, Kim regained consciousness. Astonished, he managed to groggily ask, "Lee, what are you doing?" I laughed at him, telling him that since he thought I deserved no children since I was a poor loser, I thought his children deserved no father in reverse, and that no one would know what became of him. This was quite true, as the village was a small country town with no CCTV, and that, drunk as he usually was, everyone would assume he took a wrong step and fell in the river. I finished up the wall and left, his muffled cries ringing in my ears. As you know, my son, more than 20 years have passed since then, but recently, I've been starting to hear things. I hear Kim's voice pleading with me to free him, or threatening that I would pay for what I did. It was enough to keep me from my sleep, but the other night, I saw Kim at the foot of my bed, laughing at me, telling me it was my turn now. I thought it was a dream, but I found a mound of dirt, the same dirt from the cellar floor, in the morning. Please, my dear son, if I have disappeared or died mysteriously, bury the entrance to that cellar and tear down the old house to the ground in my place. When I finished reading this, I naturally thought my father had gone mad and would have ignored the letter. But, on the advice of my father's solicitor, I decided it would be safe to recover the body of my father's friend, if there was one, and to give it a proper burial, then tear down the house, as my father asked me to. So, 2 weeks earlier, I went down to my grandmother's old house and hired a team of workers to remove the bricks from the wall of the cellar, but, and this is why I am writing this here, I and the workers saw something utterly inexplicable. We did indeed find a body walled up, tied up with old ropes, as my father said, and curiously well, preserved, as if it had died yesterday. However, the body was not that of a stranger. It was that of my father, not as I saw him last, but just as I remembered him in my youth when he was 40, exactly when he had walled up his friend. In case you're wondering, yes, the walls were untouched when we arrived for at least 20 years, and yes, the body was that of my disappeared father, just younger. What did I do with that discovery, you wonder? Nothing, actually. I just removed the body and asked the workers to seal up the cellar entrance with cement and tear down the house, paying them well to keep all this a secret. And I would have let this pass as a weird incident. But since I uncovered the body in that old cellar wall, I've been having strange dreams as well. I see my father mostly, begging me to help him get out. I hear his voice after dark, when I'm alone in my house, praying me to help him. But I also have other dreams as well. I sometimes see a stranger, laughing at me. He mocks me, saying I shouldn't have torn down that wall. And when I see him in my dreams, I wake up to find a mound of dirt beside my bed. I don't know what to do now. Should I go back to where that house was?